Hello, this is Baal Kadmon, and I would like to thank you for watching and or listening to this podcast. Today, I'm announcing the pre-release of my book, Samael, A History. It's currently in pre-release on Amazon. And please note, the cover is not the final cover. It's just a placeholder for now, since Amazon requires a cover. I will be changing that cover soon. So, this book, I thoroughly enjoyed writing and researching for it. There's a lot here. I mean, people think they know Samael, but when you go deep into very obscure texts, you learn things about him that you couldn't have possibly known just based on the available literature in the occult community. For example, you know how people think that the first murder was Cain against Abel, right? But in the literature, the first murder occurred inside the Garden of Eden, and the first one to be murdered was Samael's son. Not only was he murdered, he was cannibalized. I know, you don't find this anywhere else, but you will find it in this book, and I will show you even the sources for that. So anyway, this book will be very comprehensive. It's going to cover everything from the origins of his name, how he has evolved from the different traditions, how in some traditions he's only an angel, in other traditions he's only a demon, and in some where he's both. And there's even a tradition that he is the God of the Old Testament, that he's the God himself. And that's something that you don't want to miss. In this podcast, I'm going to read you one chapter from the book. A lot of people don't know that this is part of his history. The name of the chapter is Samael, the Exodus, and Job. I hope you enjoy it. Samael, the Exodus, and Job. As you can probably surmise from the title of this chapter, we are going to go on a bit of an odd journey. A journey only the rabbis could take us through. Before I get into it, I want to get some preliminaries out of the way first. As you probably know, Moses was the one who took the Israelites out of Egypt. Prior to the Exodus, the Israelites were enslaved there. How long is up for debate? It may not even have happened at all, since there's no real concrete archaeological evidence that they were there. But that is for another time. As he took them out of Egypt, Moses and the Israelites encountered many roadblocks, and time after time, the Israelites grew weary and afraid. When Moses went up Mount Sinai to receive the 10 Commandments, which oddly took 40 days, the Israelites had had enough. They were languishing in the desert for far too long, and they were increasingly vulnerable to the slings and arrows of nature and nomadic tribes. They decided that the God of Moses had abandoned them, and God knows what happened to Moses, pun intended. In their fear and frustration, they decided to melt all their gold and the gold they took out of Egypt and had a golden calf built so they can worship it. The golden calf, of course, is a representation of a god. We need to remember that the Israelites were not strict monotheists from the start. Any rabbinic text that states that they were is propaganda. The Israelites and Hebrews were idol worshippers through and through. It is for this reason it was very easy for them to default to the golden calf. But that story isn't even the only incident. Throughout the Old Testament, Israelites fall time and time again to idol worship because that was their default. Monotheism was not natural to them. It did not come naturally to any ancient culture in that region, so it makes sense they too were polytheists at heart. So enamored were the Israelites with the golden calf, they worshipped it with great vigor. Legend has it that the calf itself was in some way alive. And guess who gave it life? You guessed it, Samael. The rabbi said that Samael made the golden calf respond to their worship to further incite the Israelites to worship it. In Rabbeinu Bachia's commentary of Exodus 32:4-5, he states, Rabbi Yehuda said that Samael entered the calf and lowed, making the Israelites think that the calf itself was capable of mooing and therefore was alive. That is a very interesting account of the event. And this is not the only place we see this. In Islam, they view Samael as the one responsible for the golden calf as well. We will get into that later. Now let's add Job to the mix here. Now, you're probably thinking, what does this have to do with Job? I know, it's not exactly clear, but it will be in a moment. For those who do not know, the book of Job is a text in the Old Testament. In it, we have a man who was upright his whole life. He was rich and prosperous. He was without blemish in the eyes of God. But Satan, as he is wont to do, likes to gamble. He goes up to God and places a bet. He states in no uncertain terms that he can break Job's faith. God is willing to make this wager, but with one caveat. Do not touch his soul and do not kill him. Satan gets a green light and heaps ungodly misfortune on Job to see if he breaks, but he does not. Satan spent a lot of time trying to crush Job, but failed. It almost seems like a waste of time for Satan to do this. However, it appears that he did this to Job for a reason. The Jewish legends have an interesting side story that ties this and the Exodus together. If you recall, earlier in the book, we established that Satan and Samael are one and the same. Samael is the accuser, and his job is to find fault. When the Israelites left Egypt on the way to the quote-unquote promised land, they constantly backslide, and Samael was very busy being their accuser. He was relentless. Here, let's take a look at the story from Legends of the Jews 3:1. Moses, however, was still very much troubled in mind on account of Samael, who had not left off lodging accusations before God against Israel since the exodus from Egypt. The Lord adopted the same procedure in dealing with the accuser as an experienced shepherd, who at the moment of transferring his sheep across a stream was faced by a ravening wolf. The shepherd threw a strong ram to the wolf, and while the two engaged in combat, the rest of the flock was carried across the water. And then the shepherd returned and snatched the wolf's supposed prey away from him. Samael said to the Lord, "Up to this time the children of Israel were idol worshippers, and now thou proposest so great a thing as dividing the sea for them?" What did the Lord do? He surrendered Job to Samael, saying, "While he busies himself with Job, Israel will pass through the sea unscathed, and as soon as they are in safety, I will rescue Job from the hands of Samael." Isn't that something? Apparently Job was alive during the Exodus, and mind you, he was not a Hebrew or Israelite. So if this is correct, God had to distract Samael from being a stumbling block for the Israelites, and his way of doing so was to use Job as bait. Once the Israelites were safely on the other side of the water divide, God saves Job. The story is insane, truly, but that is what it states. As we see here and in other stories, Samael is the Satan in general and the Satan that tempted Job. But now we know that he did so as a distraction from hindering the Israelites from crossing the Red Sea. There you have it, my friends, one chapter from my book, Samael, A History. Very interesting, right? And there's many, many more stories like this that people just don't know about when it comes to Samael. Now, I'd like to say the book is currently in pre-release. It says that it'll be out in 90 days, but it's going to be out much, much sooner. It just gives me a little bit of wiggle room, get the cover together, make sure all the final edits are in and all that. But I'm going to cover a lot here. I mean, we're going to cover everything about Samael, from the ancient texts to the Gnostic texts and even the modern occultist texts, which, interestingly enough, more like the grimoires, consider him to be an angel only. So you don't really see his demonic nature in a lot of these grimoires, but you see a lot of it in all the texts prior to that. So it is an interesting story. His story is very complex and very varied. And so I think that you will enjoy this book. I mean, it's probably the only place right now that you can find all that information on Samael in one place. So if you are interested, it is available on Amazon. You can check out the link below and you can get yourself a copy. And like I said, it'll be done in a few weeks, not 90 days. I just had to give myself some wiggle room. With that, I hope you are well, and I will speak to you soon. So mote it be.